Welcome to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast, your guide to future tech trends and innovation in a language you understand. Now, over to your host, Neil Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast, and of course, 2019. I'm glad you decided to spend another year with me. Do you guys have any idea what you're letting yourself in for? Now, over the holidays, I've been planning what I want to do in 2019 and how I was going to hit the ground running on January the 1st. But I'm going to be honest with you here, I failed at the first hurdle because, confession time, I'm afraid that your flawed podcast host enjoyed himself a little bit too much on New Year's Eve, and I've been nursing the mother of all hangovers all day. It's not big, it's certainly not clever. So the Run 500 Miles in 2019 goal will officially begin at the slightly later time of tomorrow. And although 500 miles in a year sounds a lot, mathematically it's only 9.61 mile a week, which I think's more than achievable. But again, I have to confess, I've tried doing this before and failed after attending a few conferences or going on holiday. Suddenly, when you find yourself playing catch-up, it isn't that easy. And that is one of the reasons that I'm roping you guys in on the act too, so you can keep me on the straight and narrow this year. So please, feel free to kick my ass and let me know your Runkeeper username so we can have a bit of banter along the way. But this is not a New Year, New Me, Keep Fit in 2019 podcast. It's about sharing real stories of how technology is not only transforming multiple industries, but also people's lives too. And for that reason, today I want to share a story with you all about a company called Bubble, which is a visual programming tool that allows anyone to build a custom, complex website without writing or even seeing a single line of code. Now, some tech enthusiasts will think that Bubble is just too good to be true, especially considering that many platforms have tried and failed to deliver code-free website building. But I'm reliably informed that this platform truly works, and an experienced Bubble user can actually build a web app in similar complexity to Airbnb in about 1 week. And to prove just how easy Bubble has made it for the average person to build a custom and complex website, one of their users decided to try and build a clone of Twitter, and this is what put them on my radar. And they successfully cloned Twitter in only 4 days using the Bubble platform. And I'll add the link to the blog post that accompanies this episode over on my website at techblogwriter.co.uk, just so you can kind of visualise and see what I'm talking about here. But enough spoilers from me, let's get him on the show. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to New York so we can speak with Emmanuel Straschnov, founder of Bubble. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So my name is Emmanuel Straschnov, and I'm founder of a startup based in New York called Bubble that basically empowers people to program without writing code. It's something that people have tried to do for years, but people still teach code at schools. And so we think we should have our shot at that. And we've been doing that for quite a while, actually. It's 6 years now. So even though we're still a startup, it's fairly established. And that's what I'm doing full time. Personally, I'm originally from France, as I guess people can hear because of my accent. But I've been away from France for actually 13 years now. I moved right after college to Asia for 4 years. I was working consulting in China and then came to the United States for my MBA. And it's through the school I was at. So I did my MBA at Harvard, and I met through the school network my co-founder who had graduated earlier from college from Harvard, Josh. And we decided to partner on Bubble in 2012.
Fantastic. And like you said a few moments ago there, Bubble actually allows anyone to build and host web applications without writing a single line of code. And users start off with a blank canvas that I believe that they can then create web pages and drag and drop features which allow users to easily resize maps, text boxes, images, and so much more. But can you tell me a little bit more about exactly what Bubble is and the kind of problems that you're solving for everyday users?
So Bubble is basically two things. It's a visual programming tool. So that's the part you just described. So it's very much, it looks like, PowerPoint in many ways, where you design your application. Our whole mission is to make programming as easy as using PowerPoint and Excel. That's really what we're trying to do. And so the interface is not like PowerPoint, but that's a similar spirit. So if you're familiar with those tools, it would be fairly easy to get familiar with the Bubble interface very quickly. So that's one thing that Bubble is. The second thing that Bubble is the part that you don't see, but that is even more important, is that it's a platform that runs the application. Because if we tell people that they can build things without writing code, it's not to tell them afterwards, well, now you're done, so now you have to set up your own servers. So we take care of that automatically. And so that actually takes way more time from us than the editor, is making sure things work at scale. And so the problem we're solving for people, well, is basically like today building custom software, except if you work at a large company that has huge budgets or a technical startup with some technical people, like some engineers, you're basically out of luck if you need to build something. It's that's why, people try to do outsourcing, and it's very painful most of the time. Like most people have a pretty bad experience, or you need to learn how to code. So very practically, our users can be, trying to start a company, but they're not technical themselves, and they don't want to spend like $100,000 to get their product off the ground, or a small business owner that needs to build some custom solution to, I don't know, manage his inventory, or automate his invoicing system, or all these things. And you would have to go to a local development shop, and that would cost him a fortune to do that. And also the problem is that you pay a fortune to get your product, but then 6 months later, your business flow has changed because, things change, and now you need to go back to the first shop that did you that and ask them for a new iteration, which is going to cost you even more. So you can't evolve the platform, the product, but you need to work as fast as your business changes. And so we're really solving problems for those two people. It's actually pretty wide, because when I say people that want to start companies and are not technical, can be a student doing a side project. Like a lot of our users are not necessarily full-time working on their product, and they use that also as a way to try something on the side before they quit a job to be full-time on their startup.
And I think we can safely predict that there are going to be more than a few tech enthusiasts listening to us now thinking, I've kind of heard this all before, and might initially think that Bubble initially sounds too good to be true, especially as, like you mentioned a few moments ago, there's been many platforms that have tried and failed to deliver code-free website building in the past. So can you guide them through exactly how the platform works and how an experienced Bubble user can actually build a web app similar in complexity to, let's say, Airbnb in about a week? Because it's phenomenal.
Yes, it is actually. I mean, the fact that it's too good to be true, it goes both ways. It's great because I actually know it's true, so that makes me think that really we have something valuable in our hands. But that also makes our communication difficult, because the first thing we hear is people are very skepticism around the idea. Honestly, the best way to see how it works would be to try it. It's actually free to sign up, so people could see the way it works. I actually don't think it's that revolutionary. In a way, with all the interfaces, when you think about Airbnb, for instance, the first page, you're going to have, a large picture that, rotates, a large image that will rotate pictures of apartment. Then you're going to have where do you want to go in an input box, and then probably a check-in and check-out date and a search button. So you design that exactly as I described it. I mean, you would need probably design if you want to make it as pretty as Airbnb, but at least functionally, it's not very complicated to add those different elements on the page. And that's very much what the Bubble editor lets you do. Again, by drawing and dragging and dropping the different elements, you can type whatever you want. It's not templated in any way. So it does take a little bit of time to make things pretty, but you're not constraining what it looks like. And then for the functional aspect, you're going to say, and that's where we have something that I think no one has tried to do the way we have done. And it's proved, we proved over the years that it's actually a very powerful way to enable users to describe things, that we let the user say, for instance, literally when the button, let's say you're on the page when you want to book the apartment. So we're going to say when the user clicks on book, and then you describe your workflow action by action, and we've basically pre-built those elementary actions. So the first action is going to be create a booking, which is a thing in the database, and you're going to say, so the date is going to be, and you can pick with the system of drop-down the different elements the information comes from. Then you're going to say, charge a credit card. Then you're going to say, send an email with the invoice and for confirmation. And we've pre-built those actions. So we built the action to create a thing in the database, we built the action to send an email, and we built the action to charge a credit card, for instance. All those things, by the way, charging credit card happen through plugins, so that we actually don't build them. Like users build them for us. What we've built for the community, what we've built is the engine that runs those workflows and the way to describe them. And this is actually very powerful, because when you look at a product like Airbnb, anyone who's non-technical can actually describe very non-ambiguously what the website does by saying, when the user clicks here, you do this, you do this, you do that. It sometimes can be fairly complicated. You can be like, yeah, if the user is logged in and clicks on that button, you do this. If the user is logged out, well, you show him a pop-up to log in first. So that can be complex, but it's not technical. It doesn't rely on code. And anyone that has a product sensitiveness can do that fairly easily. And basically what Bubble is a interface that speaks that language instead of forcing the users to speak the coding language, which is much, much harder to learn.
So to help people listening understand and visualise just how easy it is and to prove just how easy Bubble has made it for the average person to build a custom complex website, can you tell me the story where I believe one of your users decided to try and build a clone of the Twitter platform? And I believe they successfully cloned Twitter in just 4 days using the Bubble platform.
Right.
It's a fantastic example, isn't it?
It is. So when we say clone Twitter, by the way, it's probably cloning like 70% of the functionality. So there were some stuff like, I don't think he implemented direct messaging, but he did implement, tweeting, obviously, following, retweeting, quoting, tagging people, which is really core to the Twitter with, the mention at and then the username, which is really what Twitter is as a product. And yeah, he did that in 4 days. That was a little bit a way to show that Bubble was powerful. I mean, he was not part of Bubble. He's not an employee, but he was very excited to show the world what Bubble could do. And so he did that a little bit as a personal challenge. And again, to what I was describing earlier, this is, the workflow that's going to be to create a tweet would be, literally when the user clicks post or tweet, I don't remember, it's going to be create a new tweet in the database, and the tweet is going to have one field which is going to be the content, basically, because that's all it has. And automatically we've had, the creation date and who created it. And again, we've pre-built those elementary actions to create a tweet. It's actually, it's less complicated than it sounds.
So I've got to ask then, what was the story behind Bubble? Can you tell me a little bit more about how you actually bootstrapped your way to tech startup success? And I think you've also doubled your revenue and user base in less than a year, haven't you?
Yes, we have. So the idea behind Bubble, the story when we met, was really to empower people to start companies. It was in 2012, New York, as most places in the US, but New York in particular, has a huge shortage of engineers. Everybody, in some circles, a lot of people wanted to try things. They were trying to find engineers and they couldn't find them. And so we felt there was a very big imbalance in the market because there is a strong need, it's underserved. And when it's served, actually, it's not necessarily the best use of engineering talent because a lot of startups are actually not deeply technical. It's more a new business model that is empowered by technology. Deliveroo in the UK, for instance, I don't know if it's a tech company. It's more like a logistic company that has done very smart ways to make the logistic process easier, but I wouldn't necessarily say it's a very tech company, and having too many engineers working there is not necessarily the best allocation of talent. So that's where we started. And we felt quite early on that this was not necessarily the right business to be traditionally funded by venture capitalists too early in the progress of the company. And the reason being, as soon as you raise money, you actually constrain yourself to grow. So yeah, we did grow over the last year, but it's been 6 years we've done that. But we certainly were not growing during the first 3 years because you need to get to a very, very good product to start actually selling it to people. In particular, because all the previous attempts have failed, as you mentioned earlier. And so we felt like raising money would put us, on a pace that we just would not be able to sustain. And so we bootstrapped the whole way. So the first 3 years were, I wouldn't call that bootstrapping. I mean, we were basically living on our savings. My co-founder and I, we didn't hire anyone, so it was just the two of us. Because if you don't have money to hire people, when you do that everything yourself, and we started generating real revenue in late 2015, and since then, now we have a team of 10 people, and now we've been able to just using client revenue to grow the team. And today we have a more traditional VC backed, even though we're not funded yet. We have a more traditional VC trajectory where we do double every year, but it's really because the core of the product is ready, which was not the case during the first 4 years. It takes a long time to get to something that actually works. Looking back, I mean, we could have done things a little bit faster, but maybe 6 months faster. I'm not sure we could have done 2 years faster.
And of course, any startup founder would all love the gift of hindsight, but it's just simply not possible. But I'm curious, if I took you back in time, I mean, is there anything that you wish you'd known when you first started out that you didn't know at the time?
Probably that two things, that it would take longer than I thought, because to be honest, when we started in 2012, I was not expecting that it would take us like 4 years to get to something that would actually work. I don't know if it would have changed anything. I think I would have done it still, but it would have been good to know that. The second thing that I wish I had known, and I didn't necessarily realize that when we started, is the level of pressure that comes when you build the tools that let people build their business on top of you. The level of pressure that comes with that is really high. And today it's more manageable because the platform is more mature. But for the first, when we started having like real users and customers in 2014, 2015, to I guess middle of last year, where the platform was still fairly early, the level of pressure and the level of frustration we could feel from users can be pretty difficult, and that's something that I wish I had been better prepared for. But on the other hand, it's not a bad thing, because that means you build something that really matters to your users. So this is great, but it's tough.
So why do you think that you've been successful in a niche where so many others have failed?
Well, I think because we took the time to do things right. Like if a key decision that really got us where we are is not to raise money initially, because we were like, yeah, it's taking longer, but at the end of the day, especially when we started making revenue, so we started paying ourselves in 2014, so 2 years in. So we were 2 years without salary, and then we started taking salaries. So we were like, yeah, it's not going as fast as a more traditional VC-backed startup, but we know we're doing things that make our users happy. We know the product is getting better, and it's good to do it that way. And we didn't have the external pressure except coming from users, but that's a very healthy pressure to have. Well, pressure from investors, it depends. I mean, you have to be careful. Sometimes the incentives are not necessarily very well aligned. So I really think that's what let us launch a product that was already really good instead of launching too soon. The big problem with what we do, and that's why I think so many startups had issues in the past making the promise we're making, is the level of skepticism is so high that if you come with a half-baked solution on the market, people will try it. They'll be, oh yeah, it's not better than the others, and they leave. So you basically have to wait as long as possible to launch publicly. In our case, it was literally 4 years, or like 3 years and a half. We launched in October 2015 publicly. So that was like, and we started in June 2012. So yeah, 3 years and a few months. You have to wait long enough to be in a good place. So you know that most customers, when they will ask you, hey, do you support this? Do you support that? You can say yes. And for us, it took us a few years.
So there are a lot of startup founders that listen to this podcast each day, and they want to learn from other startup founders. So I've got to ask, I mean, are there any particularly funny or interesting stories that have happened to you since you began leading your company that you could share with us today?
Yeah, I mean, well, I don't know if they're funny. We certainly had, I think one of the most moving thing, like the touching thing that happened with us is the communities that has happened online, where we see people helping each other, and we see people, they even meet offline. They organize, meetups and stuff like that without us being involved. That's, it's very interesting. I don't know if it's funny, but it's interesting to see that. And it's very interesting when you start seeing people that use the tool you created to do things you didn't think were possible. Which is great. In terms of funny, I don't know. I mean, we get a lot of emails from our users sometimes where they tell us what they do with the product. A user once emailed us to say that we saved his relationship with his girlfriend, because he had the tradition every year, to buy. It's actually a season thing, for Christmas. When you have the calendar, how do you call this? And you open every day, and you have a chocolate. And so he had this tradition with his girlfriend to do that every year. And well, one year he forgot. I think that was 2 years ago. And so on December 1st, he basically spent the day building a digital calendar on Bubble that he would give to his girlfriend. So his girlfriend, and he could do that because he could keep adding more surprises behind the clicks with the days. And he emailed us say, "You guys saved my relationship, because if I hadn't done that, I think we would have broken up." I mean, I say that as a funny thing and as a joke, but it's actually very core to what we do. I mean, our long-term mission is not to empower people to start companies, because this is more a way we get people on the platform, because when people want to start companies, they're willing to take take more risks by definition. And so it's a good way to bring a new platform. But fundamentally, what we're doing is we're trying to make that programming computers is not any different than using computers. And so to illustrate that, when someone uses us to build a how do you call this calendar? Christmas calendar? I don't know.
Advent calendar.
Advent, right? It's the same as March. So when we start seeing people that build Advent calendars on Bubble, this is exactly what the product is for. It's not the money making part. So I don't want people to only build Advent calendars, because we priced our model, our system is priced in a way that it's really for companies that start scaling, that pay. But fundamentally, though, this is exactly the reason why we're doing this, is empower people to, they have a need, whether it's personal, professional, it doesn't really matter. They can do it easily without, having to study or anything before.
Now, you guys have enjoyed fantastic success last year in 2018. But if we look forward now, what is it that excites you about the future of Bubble?
Well, we're in the process of scaling fairly aggressively. So right now we have 10 people. I think we're probably going to double the size this year in terms of headcount. So Bubble was really a project pushed by two guys, like Josh and I, my business partner and I. Then we started having a team last year. We started we hired people mid 2017. So we went from 2 to 10. And now we're really looking into professionalizing the organization, which means doing whatever it takes to start servicing bigger companies, probably not enterprise next year, but the year after. Because what I'm describing with an individual that needs to be on an Advent calendar is also true for large corporations that are basically paralyzed by the speed of IT and how expensive IT is versus the needs of the teams. That changes every day. And so we want to be able to service those things, which means probably start structuring the business. Bubble has already been structured as a company, but structuring in a way that just services better, like enterprise, larger customers, which is going to take a lot of work, by the way, because as soon as you start getting into the space of larger corporations using you have to do things that you don't really need to worry about when you only talk to individuals and startups, and that's going to take a lot of investment from our end.
So if we've got anyone listening that want to check it out and see just how easy it is to get up and running with Bubble, can you just remind the listeners of where they can find you guys online, and also maybe even contact a member of your team if they have any questions or if they run into any problems?
Yeah, so it's bubble.is. Usually when people Google Bubble, if you type Bubble Visual Programming or something like that, we should be the first thing that comes out on Google. And the best way to contact us is either to go on our website and there's a contact us form, or contact@bubble.is goes to our team. If people mention that they heard me speak in this podcast, that email should be redirected to me. So that's a good way to get in touch.
Fantastic. Well, I love what you're doing here, and I love how you've accomplished a bootstrap tech startup and doubled your revenue and user base in such a short space of time. But what's most impressive for me, at least, is how you've achieved where so many others have tried and failed. So that's a fantastic thing on its own. So a big thank you for coming on, especially with it being a bank holiday today. It's a national holiday all over the world, with it being New Year's Day. But a big thank you for taking that time to come and speak with me today and sharing the story of Bubble. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. I had a great time.
I love how Bubble allows anyone to easily build and host web applications without writing a single line of code. How cool is that? And also how users just start off with this blank canvas and they can create web pages with drag and drop features where they can easily resize map, text boxes, images, and so much more. It almost feels like the only limit is actually your imagination. So again, a big thank you to Bubble's co-founder Emmanuel for chatting with me today and sharing some of the impressive things that they've been able to accomplish, and also sharing some of that feedback that they get from their online community. But it's all very well me and Emmanuel sat here on New Year's Day talking into a microphone about how easy it is. Because how easy it is very subjective. So I want to hear from techies and non-techies to find out what they think of Bubble. Go on the website, have a look, have a play around. Are there any exciting opportunities and equally challenges? And how easy is it to use the platform? I want to hear all your opinions, both positive and negative, because I think that way we can all learn a thing or two by digesting information from multiple vantage points. And not only that, it'll also help the guys at Bubble improve. So email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, tweet me at Neil C. Hughes. Let me know how you get on. I am genuinely interested in the kind of things that you create and how easy you find the platform. As for me, well, thankfully, a combination of Lucozade Sport and your company has eased my hangover. So I promise not to have another blowout for the foreseeable future. I've learnt my lesson the hard way. But I would love to hear your goals, your objectives for 2019 too. Remember, I always say on January the 1st every year, if you record one podcast a week, one blog post a week, that's going to give you 100 pieces of content against your name. So feel free to contact me if you need my help with any of that. And finally, before I go, Rob Mitchell, Sam Latimer, if you're listening, I expect you to create your 500-mile goal on Runkeeper today. And everyone else that's not contacted me yet, I hope your commute back to the office isn't too harsh and you manage to gently ease yourself back into that dreaded daily grind. As for me, I'm about to enter silly season, and first of all we have CES in Vegas on the horizon. So no matter where you're listening in the world and whatever you do for a living, I'm going to be working hard to provide you with interesting stories about how technology is transforming everything, but also I'm going to try and inspire you a little bit through these stories too. How does that sound? Well, I will report back for duty tomorrow, and I hope you will join me. So a big thank you for listening, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thanks for listening to the Tech Blog Writer Podcast. Until next time, remember, technology is best when it brings people together.